When I was younger, 10 years old to be precise, and this was in 2016, I thought that drawing, writing, and creating my own stories was not something that could become my field of study and work, but I was wrong. It was around that time that I fell in love with manga like Blue Exorcist, Tokyo Ghoul, and many other series that honestly no 10-year-old should be reading. And it was also at this time that I came to realize that the books, comics, cartoons, movies, and series that I loved were made by people. Adults that turned what I thought were a bunch of childish hobbies into their jobs. That realization made me excited for the future, excited to become an art student and try to make all of this my whole life. Despite the rise of artificial intelligence, I'm confident that a lot of people are begging for human authenticity in the media they consume, and that if my 10-year-old me found out I was finally making a comic, she would be fangirling over it. So without further ado, hi, I'm Muffs, welcome to the Muffs ART-CHIVE, and this is how I made my first zine and the beginning of the Forever Ghosts project. The origins of Forever Ghosts. How did we get here? In 2020, I wrote and drew a lot of different OCs, and back then I decided to create my own JoJo's Bizarre Adventure story. I'm not joking, by the way, I swear this is relevant, bear with me. And this story had my own characters and a plot that revolved around ghosts, mystery, and the supernatural. Joel Joestar, Neil Zeppeli, and Lilian Noriaki were the main characters, as descendants of Joseph, Shiza, and Kakyoin from the original series. They would investigate and fight against a villain who was a prominent figure in the fashion industry and was directly related and responsible for a wave of missing children and women and other supernatural appearances. The story was inspired by the Mystery Skulls animated series and Mystery Skulls' music, which has always been my favorite and the one that gives life to my projects and ideas. I ended up not continuing this JoJo's alternative universe or story of sorts, and abandoned these characters, even though I have to admit that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was the #1 motivator that made me study anatomy, experiment with color, and the exaggeration of a character's expressions and movements back then. 4 years later, at the start of 2024, I was doing my last year of high school at an art school, one of the most prominent ones in my country, Portugal, and when my class got assigned with making our own art exhibition for our management of the arts subject, it was something like that. Each student had to create a piece for the exhibition with no limitations, and then the class would decide which ones got in and which ones got out. I really wanted to make an illustration for the exhibition, but I was struggling to get an idea in my head until I remembered my JoJo's OCs from 2020. And during our class, as the teacher explained our assignment, I started sketching and redrawing all of the characters until I eventually came up with, in the span of like 1 or 2 hours, with the Forever Ghosts project. And this was the illustration I drew back then, and that ended up being chosen for our class's exhibition. Now that you know the origins of the project and my biggest inspirations, what exactly is Forever Ghosts about? Forever Ghosts tells you the story of Liliana, a Portuguese girl in her early 20s. Her relationship with her parents is complicated, and ever since she was a young girl, her dream was to become a pop star. Even though her parents initially supported her, her journey for the arts of singing and dancing was cut short when she was pressured to follow a real career and enter the veterinary medicine course. Unhappy with the life she was taking, she began to miss classes and eventually drop out without her parents knowing, chasing her real goals behind their backs with many failed auditions and projects. At the same time, Liliana's mom's mental health declined at a rapid speed, and it was only then that Liliana tells her parents the truth, and that the little hope she had was immediately torn apart. Her mother was paranoid, violent, easily irritated, and claimed that she was being tormented by ghosts, which sounded absurd to everyone around her. Amidst the chaos that her life had turned into, she receives an offer to audition for a modeling agency. This agency was looking for alternative and different people to launch a new fashion brand that wants to be inclusive and experimental above all else. They had her contact from another agency she auditioned for a few months prior and were interested in her profile. And even though all of this looked very shady, dangerous, and weird, she decided to go on the audition and she passed. It was around the same day that she first stepped into the modeling agency to work that she began to feel weak, panicked, and paranoid in some way, seeing visions, blurry silhouettes walking among the streets she crossed. And then she would eventually say to herself and admit that she thinks she's seeing ghosts. Those were the exact same words Liliana's father described to her regarding her mother's debilitated state, and what she had been claiming for months, years even. Little did Liliana know that this was the beginning of a mess she accidentally put herself into, and it was only after establishing the synopsis that I decided to finish and release Forever Ghosts 0, a zine that serves as an introduction to the art style and story of Forever Ghosts. A zine is a magazine, produced in an unprofessional yet accessible way for smaller audiences, and at the start of 2025, I was doing a graphic design course where I was tasked with creating a zine on anything I'd like. Even though I changed to, and I am currently doing a multimedia arts bachelor's degree, I still love the unfinished product I had from my previous course, from March of 2025. But I hadn't found motivation or a good reason to continue it. That was until the new year came by, and I just said to myself, why not finish the zine and use it as an introduction to the project and the Forever Ghosts comic that I want to start developing. So that is what all of this is. I finished the zine as of January of 2026, and it is now out on Webtoon and Global Comics as the introductory chapter of the comic. You could say I'm technically cheating and lying to you with the title of this video, but I'd like to argue against that idea and tell you that this zine is just a first look into what I have in store for the Forever Ghosts project, and I guess a mix between the comic book dynamics and the other aspects that make a zine become a zine with illustrations. In this scene, you can see bits of the story. I experimented with the art style, the color palette as much as I could. I tried mixing digital art and traditional sketches to create a unique look for the project, and I'd love to know what you think about this and everything I have to show you so far. What worked well, what didn't, if you think it wasn't consistent, if you think there's something lacking, etc. But moving on, let's introduce the characters first. Liliana is our protagonist. She was born without an eye, and that is a key for her to be able to see ghosts, but I'll explain that later on. Joel is the son of the CEO of the modeling agency Liliana now works for. Neil is a fashion and beauty content creator. Chris is a former child star that fought with depression and addiction for years before stepping out of the public eye and finding true happiness and fulfillment in her life. Teresa also has a complicated relationship with her parents and is working with Liliana as a model for the same agency. Alvaro is a fashion designer, the CEO of the modeling agency, and also the owner of the fashion brand they're working for. He's also Joel's father. Hanjin is a veterinary medicine student, a mysterious and cold guy in many different ways, and he was also Liliana's classmate before she dropped out. The scar on his neck is directly related to his ability to see ghosts. And this, sometimes little and sometimes huge fella, is a ghost. So now I have to explain how ghosts work in this story. The supernatural works as an alternative plane, or reality that overlaps with ours, but isn't necessarily accessible to everyone. Ghosts are always present. They're the figures, silhouettes, and blurry visions many seem to be faced with daily, but only a specific group of people can actively see them and interact with the supernatural, or get that ability awakened within them. People like Liliana, who were born without a certain limb, who have a missing eye in her case, or a disability, are destined to eventually awaken their ability to permanently see and interact with ghosts, and this is inspired by the ghost limb theory. There are also cases of people who begin to have contact with the supernatural after traumatic experiences, after a decline in their mental health, or after getting close to fatal wounds. Hanjin is one of those people, and his scar is exactly that, a symbol that hides a traumatic and near-death experience he was faced with. For someone who does not fit the description I just gave you, who has none of these characteristics, there's also another way of awakening the ability to see ghosts, and that's by performing rituals. These awakening rituals are graphic and usually demand someone to sacrifice a piece of their body or mind, if you get what I mean. So this ghost, the rat, as Liliana will begin to call it, is a ghost that suspiciously follows her around at all times from the moment she began to awaken her abilities when she turned 20 years old. I'd also like to talk about, without spoiling too much and to end the lore drop I'm making in this video, about how there are two types of ghosts, the corrupted and the free. Free ghosts come from people who are mostly kind and good when they were alive, and most of them can shapeshift. So human ghosts can turn into anything they'd like, for example, a cat, for some reason, and vice versa. A cat ghost can turn into a human if they want to. They're also not capable of harming nor interacting in malicious ways with our reality. Corrupted ghosts are the exact opposite. They come from people who used their free will when they were alive to be evil, to abuse and use others for their personal gain, etc. During the story, there'll also be human characters that will discover a way to control corrupted ghosts, but I won't say more than this because that'll be something that you have to find out once the comic truly begins, and I guess that is a huge spoiler that I don't really want to give as of now. The zine shows you, the reader or viewer, a bit of Liliana's journey through her struggles, subtle references to every character's relationship within the fashion industry and between each other, and the first major event in the story. All of these illustrations also tease you the malicious intent behind Alvaro and the first major character death. Yes, I'm not joking, there were some characters I left out of this video, or that I just didn't present to you because I want you to meet them solely when reading the future chapters. But leaving this huge spoiler right off the bat with the scene can seem a bit weird at first, I get it, but I swear it all will make sense eventually. But that's all for now, and I'll say it again. Chapter 0 is available on Webtoon and Global Comics. Search up Forever Ghosts, MOPS_ART-CHIVE, or go to the description or the comments on this video to have access to the links you gotta have if you want to check out this project. Thank you so much for watching this video. It is a dream come true to be finally able to showcase such an ambitious personal project on the internet. This scene was the perfect opportunity to experiment and establish the art style and overall look of the project, and I'd love if you told me in the comments which page was your favorite. Your feedback is needed and appreciated, and I hope you all stay tuned for the future of Forever Ghosts. Bye!